participated with your campaign of bashing transgender children and transgender people in general. I don't think Jesus would have done that. Be charitable to our existence, at least. If you can't be empathetic to the existence of trans people, be charitable to our messages, at least. Kind of fallacious to say, I know these great experts, and here's what they have to say on a subject they're not experts on. They are not in agreement with you on the theology that you hold dearly to. They are not in agreement with you with the biology they hold dearly to them. Richard Dawkins, there, have him. Richard Dawkins agrees with you, but you don't agree with him on his theological conclusions. Why do you agree with him on his gender conclusions? He doesn't really think we should exist either. He's a complete jerk about that. But you know what also he is? Not an expert in gender studies, not an expert in that at all. Hello, hello, and thank you for joining me. It's Brandi's World, and I'm Brandi Beckett. Today, we are taking another look at Generation Indoctrination the Transgender Battle, which is a podcast that is brought to us by the Christian Post and hosted by one of their journalists, Brandon Showalter. So in this season, Brandon teams up with a minister, yes, this guy, Jeff Myers.
We're after the kind of evidence we would expect to ground modern medical treatment. Impossibly short statutes of limitations practically guarantee that doctors are far removed from liability by the time serious symptoms present themselves, which is often a decade after treatment. There is a spiritual element as well. The debate over gender ideology has revealed a raging fury against the idea that human beings bear the image of God. Nowhere is this indignation more clearly seen than in the deconstruction of the very definition of male and female. Sincere and faithful Christians cannot remain on the sidelines. We must speak with biblically informed, compassionate wisdom. The philosophical and moral questions are complex, but what
Biblically informed and compassionate wisdom from where? Give me a scripture that says something about me being trans is not okay, right? You might be able to point to what I think it's like Leviticus 22:20, I think it is. If I got it wrong, I'll put it up here. Yeah, don't allow a man to dress as a woman and a woman to dress as a man. Do you follow Leviticus laws? Let's remind you, there are 613 Leviticus laws, right? How many of the 613 do you just brush aside? Why do you like that one? Why not some shellfish? What do you enjoy shellfish, don't you? Yahweh, your deity, was pretty upset about shellfish. But he was also upset about mixed fabrics. So not only do you not supposed to dress in men's clothing or women's clothing according to Leviticus law, you are not supposed to, that's right, you're not supposed to mix your fabrics. You're not supposed to mix your wools and your cottons. Don't do that. In fact, don't even plant your grains in the same field. You can't be mixing your fields here either. This is what Yahweh thought was very important. 613 commandments that Yahweh put down into Leviticus law. And a section of those y'all like to really follow. You call them the 10 Commandments. How are these applying to our American values, by the way? Have you seen capitalism? Have you seen America? Can we follow these 10 Commandments? Yeah, you want to pick out this random one here, this Leviticus law, telling us not to dress in women or men. Guess what? Those ancient Hebrews weren't the only culture. There were other cultures of humans. What you're trying to say is that your cultural concept of gender, the ancient Hebrews who wrote down their ideas and concepts of what they thought the gender boxes should look like, right? Ancient Hebrews who lived like 2,900 years ago, almost, those people who wrote around that time about what they thought was gender, you think applies across the entire species of humans. Well, guess what? At the same time, there were human cultures across this planet who had completely different ideas of what gender labeling is and what gender roles are and how gender applies within their society. There are ancient cultures that used to live right where you're standing, here in these United States, who had other concepts besides a binary of gender identity. The Aztecs, they had at least 3 categories or labels of gender. They didn't think of it as a binary. They weren't the only culture from a few thousand years ago living here in these United States who didn't look at gender through a binary lens. So binary is not the lens the entire species sees gender identity and gender labels or gender expression. So it's not a species thing, so it can't apply to all humans. It's a cultural thing that you're trying to apply onto us, and your concept is just that. It's your concept. It's your cultural concept.
Is at stake is whether we as a human society will be able to recognize truth.
Yeah, as a human society, but you're talking about cultural concept and you're applying it across the species. And how long across the species? We understand through our fossil record and through our genome record, through our genetic history that we can trace back. We see that Homo sapiens sapiens, our group of humans, go back at least 300,000 years. At what point in this 300,000 years did this binary concept of gender just apply to everyone? Because by the time it was written down in the book you're referring to, there was multiple groups of humans across this planet who all share the same common ancestry at 300,000 years, who are spread out across this planet some 298,000 years later, and they have completely different concepts of what gender identity is. So your concept can't possibly just fit blankly across all human species, across all human times, because it doesn't. Quit trying to argue like it does. You're arguing a cultural construct and applying it to a species. That is a fallacious argument. You're looking at a part of the whole, your culture, and applying it to the whole, the human species. So not good, not a good argument again.
Discern reality. Prepare the rising generation to live confidently as image bearers of God. You may wonder if this level of concern is warranted. We will present our arguments and you can decide for yourself. But our position is twofold. First, we think that concern is warranted because the issue of gender ideology is much bigger than the few people who are genuinely experiencing a severe incongruence over their biological sex. Second, we think the concern is warranted because the struggle over gender ideology is a gospel issue that has serious medical and...
It's a gospel issue? Like the gospel stories of Jesus? Is that what you're talking about? What did Jesus have to say about gender? Everything I've ever read about Jesus, he kind of thought of the genders as kind of equal, and he lived in a culture that had a binary concept of gender, so I'm sure he used the binary concept. But he didn't tell people how to express themselves or how not to express themselves. I don't know what you're trying to say about the Gospels of Jesus' story and having to do with gender. Jesus didn't talk about anything about transgender. at all. Oh no, Jesus didn't have anything to say about transgender people.
Psychological ramifications. The book of Genesis says that God made us male and female. Jesus affirmed this teaching. Biologically, it is undeniably true. If society persists in denying the importance of this fundamental aspect of being, we could very well be hostages to chaos. And
Jesus knew what his culture knew around him, right? That's why I say, yeah, Jesus probably would have thought of gender in a binary. He probably in his lifetime maybe encountered 20,000, 30,000 people. There wasn't a lot of humans around him at that time. The percentage of people expressing themselves as trans is probably very low. Probably maybe didn't run into any trans people, probably didn't know any trans people. And if he did, they probably didn't express that. They probably didn't have a pathway to express. I don't know. But Jesus also, yes, Jesus would have understood Genesis. Jesus would have read Genesis, and that would have convinced him of the origins of our species. Yeah, Jesus believed in Adam and Eve, but Jesus also didn't understand a lot of other things about our reality. Jesus didn't understand the germ theory of disease. Jesus, great teacher. Yes. Interesting things that Jesus taught and his following. Amazing. His teachings changed the way our society today is formed. Western culture, as we call it, it grew from belief in this guy's teaching. So yeah, very important person in our human history. But I don't look to Jesus for answers about germ theory of disease or about the gravitational pull of Jupiter on this planet. I don't think Jesus would have good answers about that. Plenty of things that Jesus is a very human character about, whether you believe in his majestic ascent or if you believe he was just a teacher or what you believe about Jesus. Jesus didn't know all things available to our knowledge.
Lose our collective tether to reality, to echo the words of the evolutionary biologist Colin Wright quoted at the beginning of this introduction. This book is a crash course on a thoroughly bewildering subject. If you had asked most people 30 years ago if they'd ever met a person who sincerely claimed to be the opposite sex, few could tell you that they had. Maybe they would mention seeing what were once called transvestites at Mardi Gras, or a few troubled individuals who lived on the margins of society. But according to reputable polling, gender identity issues are now at the forefront of concern for young adults. Some polling says that 39% of young people claim to identify as LGBTQ. In addition to youth identifying as transgender, some are now saying they are non-binary, genderqueer, or another of an ever-increasing panoply for self-created gender labels. Healthline.
It's not necessarily self-created. You're getting that confused. The self is the self-identifying. The label is just the label we make up as society, right? It's a symbol of a word representing us, right? That's what the label is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a symbol that represents a bigger concept of like the self, right? I'm a trans woman. That's supposed to tell you that symbolized I was assigned male at birth, but I transitioned to express my identity as a woman. Therefore, I'm a transgender woman. That's what the label symbol represents, my transition into my womanhood. So that's not a made-up label. If they're telling you they're non-binary, it's not just made up. They're saying the system has a binary labeling. And that's it. It's just binary. I don't fit in that. When I look inside myself, I don't fit in the binary. That's what that person's saying. And they're saying, therefore, I'm using the label non-binary because it's not in the binary. It's not just made up. Come on.
Lists and defines 68 terms that describe gender identity and expression. Some
almost as if gender was on a spectrum, right? It's almost, you get 68 points of gender identity and labels for those gender identities. Wouldn't that almost be like a spectrum? That's kind of my whole point. Gender should be viewed on a spectrum. Yes, nailed that point.
Estimated that given the current ever-changing parameters of gender ideology, there could well be 3,000 different genders.
Ooh, you can put a point in between one of those points on the spectrum and you can make 6,000. And then you can put another point in between the halfway points of all those points. Do you get that? Yes, you're looking at a spectrum and trying to describe it through a binary and going, look at all these points. These points of reality where people say, this is where I exist on this reality spectrum of gender. I live at this point on this spectrum, and this is the label I'm using for that point of this spectrum. That is what that person is communicating. And you're saying, well, all I recognize is a box A and a box B of gender, and you don't seem to be fitting in there, and there's all these points that miss the box. So all of those points of reality must not be reality. That's what your argument is.
Taken for therapy or medical evaluation, current standards of care specify that those identifying as other than their biological sex be treated by therapists as if they are, in fact, something other than their biological sex. Families are being told that,
in other words, your biological sex does not equal your gender identity. So let's talk about your gender identity, which is other than your biological sex. Thank you. It's not that hard, guys. It's not. It's really not.
If they do not embrace this treatment regimen, they are putting their child at risk of suicide and perhaps risking the forfeiture of their parental rights.
Yeah.
Families are distraught and confused. Americans as a whole, according to polling by some ministries, seem baffled by the whole issue. 2/3 of Americans say they do not think that transgender identity is a normal, healthy lifestyle. 72% say it should not be taught in schools. 90% say that gender alteration drugs and surgeries should not be performed on minors. Yet for the gender ideologues and the moneyed players who set this top-down systematic deconstruction of sex in motion, the instinctual clarity that most people have about the issue is misguided. The confusion that gender ideology creates is a feature, not a bug, of this entire project. If none of this makes any reasonable sense to you, well, that is precisely the point. At the root, we are dealing with a postmodern rejection of reality that is bound to fail. The question is, how many lives will be shattered before it does? We hope that as you engage the forthcoming...
You know, they actually make a good point there. How many lives will be shattered before their campaign of ignorance and hate is so archaic it just goes away? They're going to affect a lot of people with their messages. And that scares me, people. There are going to be some poor kids out there who have no other source or outlet to express themselves, tangled in this web of discrimination and hate hidden behind a shield of Christianity. It makes me sad.
Pages, you will be equipped to address these tough and thorny themes with compassion for struggling people and with the uncompromised conviction that the truth must be proclaimed and defended. We will tackle why transgenderism is a medical and social scandal, discuss the history of gender identity.
Does scandal in your lexicon equal movement? Because we need a medical movement for transgender people, because we're not treated equally in the medical industry when we're getting our healthcare treatments across the board in most states not equal. Yeah, so we need a movement there. Not a scandal. I don't see like, hey, give us services that we need and deserve as a scandal. I see it as a movement to recognize us. And social as a scandal? Movement, right? Does movement fit better than scandal there? I think so, because my activism is focused on social normality and social equality. So, yeah. Seeking equality and seeking normality. Scandalous. No, scandal doesn't fit there, does it? Fellas, it doesn't, does it? Movement, right? Come on. be a little fair. I'm trying to just like steel person your argument a little bit most times. I'm trying to be charitable listening to your argument. I'm trying. Be charitable to our existence, at least. If you can't be empathetic to the existence of trans people, be charitable to our messages, at least.
Ideology. Show how this ideology twists language and distorts reality, and explore what a healthy and flourishing vision for human sexuality looks like in contradistinction to gender ideology. As we mentioned at the outset, this is not a left versus right issue, nor is it a science versus religion one. The biologists quoted at the beginning of this introduction are both atheists, but the truth is true, no matter who says it.
I'll do you one more. Oh, they're both atheists, so therefore they're in agreement with these Christians. Therefore, even the atheists could, what? Wait. I want to hear more of that before I comment. Let's hear.
We think these atheists are correct. We will present our evidence and reasoning in the following pages. If two atheists,
I want to hear that again. They think the atheists are true.
science versus religion one. The biologists quoted at the beginning of this introduction are both atheists, but the truth is true, no matter who says it. We think these atheists are correct. We will present our evidence and reasoning in the following pages.
I don't even kind of know who those. I like biology. I enjoy biology books. I enjoy study of biology, and I enjoy studying atheist stuff as well too. I don't know who those guys are really. I'll give you the biggest atheist name out there in biology, Richard Dawkins. There, have him. Richard Dawkins agrees with you. You think Richard Dawkins is right about his view on transgender people. He doesn't really think we should exist either. He's a complete jerk about that. But you know what also he is? Not an expert in gender studies. Not an expert in that at all. Those two biologists, I'm guessing, not experts in the field they're talking about right there either. Kind of fallacious to say, I know these great experts and here's what they have to say on a subject they're not experts on. That is fallacious. You know it is fallacious. So why are you using it? Why not just use Richard Dawkins? He feels the same way as these biologists. He feels that trans people shouldn't exist. Doesn't make him less great of a biologist or a writer. It still makes him archaic in his view of transgender people. It makes him an asshole to live in society with, but it has nothing to do with his beliefs on biology, and you still don't agree with his beliefs on biology. You don't agree with his conclusions on his theological exams too. Richard Dawkins also thinks he's an expert in theology. He comes up with conclusions about theological subjects as well as his gender subjects, but you don't agree with him on his theological conclusions. Why do you agree with him on his gender conclusions? These guys either, if they're atheist biologists, pretty sure they're not worshiping Yahweh's son, right? They are not in agreement with you on the theology that you hold dearly to. They are not in agreement with you with the biology they hold dearly to them. You both are not experts on gender studies, and you're both misinformed about that, or all of y'all are misinformed about that, but you agree with each other. So you like each other in that accent, so none of you are experts on. None of you have an expert advice, or anyone should really look to you for those subjects, right? But you agree with each other. Oh, goodness.
Two atheists can summon the courage to speak with clarity against the tide of lies surrounding gender ideology.
I threw in the third. I threw in Dawkins, too.
Should those who follow the teachings of Jesus speak boldly? The Bible says that Jesus is the one.
Yeah, speak boldly about biology like those biologists do. Speak boldly about atheism as those atheists do. Or only speak boldly about the two things y'all hate. That's what they're telling you. Y'all are scared and don't understand and hate trans people so you can all get together and go, I really don't understand, I really hate these people. That is not productive, people. It's not good for society.
Came to bear witness to the truth. John 18:37. The word for truth in the New Testament Greek means reality. Can we not be confident that in Jesus there is an antidote to what ails us? That his vision for human flourishing is worth pursuing? Do we not have a better?
Yeah, where in his visions it talk anything about smashing trans people? Jesus said, lift up those who are in need. Lift up those who are least cared for. Look around in our society. Who is least cared for? We just talked about that in our healthcare system. Trans people are not being recognized as humans in many areas of our society, and we are not being looked after. What would Jesus do? He would abandon his flock and go get the sheep who is lost. Go get the one who is being abused. Go get the one who needs protection. That is Jesus' message. Protect those who need protection. Did Jesus tell us or not tell us? Those of you who claim to know me, I will turn from you and say, you never knew me because you didn't take care of the least of my kind. The ones who no one else wanted to take care of, you didn't take care of them. I turned my back on you. I believe that's in the book you like, right? Transgender people are in need. Transgender kids are being abused by the system right now, being abused by messages like yours. If Jesus was anything like the stories written in Mark, Matthew, John, and Luke. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, right? In the three synoptics or the four gospels. If that character in those stories was anything like that when he walked this planet, when he was walking around caring for people, I don't think that man would have participated with your campaign of bashing transgender children and transgender people in general. I don't think Jesus would have done that from what I understand of that person.
Your story to proclaim.
Thank you for listening. Go over to the show notes to see how you can download Exposing the Gender Lie, How to Protect Children and Teens from the Transgender Industry's False Ideology ebook free from the Christian Post. And be sure to find out more about Dr. Jeff Myers and Summit Ministries at summit.org.
All right, y'all, that's all I can take from this podcast. Next time, we're going to get into episode 2 of season 2 with Brandon Showalter, and now we get to hear from this Jeff Myers minister guy. So, yay for us. Until next time, love yourself, but more importantly, like yourself, and treat people the way they want to be treated. Bye-bye for now.